You're listening to Choose FI Radio. The blueprint for financial independence lives here. If you're looking to unlock the secrets to financial independence and early retirement, you're in the right place. Stay tuned and join a community of like-minded people who are getting off the hamster wheel and taking control of their lives in the pursuit of financial independence. Choose FI, your home for financial independence online.
Hello, everyone. Today, we're having a conversation with a community member. We have Julia Harder joining us on the show, active duty Coast Guard and well on the path to FI. And as one of our goals, Brad and I have been wanting to just reach out and speak with people in the community, because all of us, if you're in this community, you're on the path. And your path is going to look a little bit different, but there's something to learn there. And it's this virtuous circle that Brad has been promoting since almost day one. Let us share with you what we're doing. Hopefully that inspires you in some way to share with us what you're doing, and together we'll push that to people that are following behind you and just say there are a lot of us on this path, and our lives, we don't look exactly the same, but we're moving generally in the same direction. It's towards a better life, and a better life it's not always completely linear. In Julia's case, we have a divorce, which I think if we actually take a look at it, coming out of this divorce with the path she's on now, at the time, horrible. But for her life, for her family's life, for their future, and for the path that she's on because of this, maybe the best thing that ever happened to her. And we want to take the opportunity today to explore how she's come out of this, what lessons she learned along the way, and kind of the money lessons that she's picked up, what her kids have picked up as a result of going through this process, and where she's headed. I just think this series of conversations with people from the financial independence community is going to be incredibly valuable for us and for you. And to help me with this, I have my co-host Brad here with me today. How you doing, buddy?
Hey, Jonathan, I am doing quite well. And yeah, you set this up wonderfully. I actually was emailing back and forth with Julia, and her story was just so compelling to me. And if you don't mind, I'm just going to read a paragraph here. And she said, I was on the path because I'm a natural saver. My dad said investing was important, and because Dave Ramsey told me debt was bad. Between those three bits of advice, I think anyone would be on a good financial path, but something was missing, something that I have found in FI, and something many other people have mentioned. It was purpose. It was the option to choose my own path. My entire life, I've done what I was supposed to do. I got straight A's, student council president in multiple sports, volunteered at church, all these things, went to a military academy, and I struggled to understand why I was so unhappy and directionless. And I think that's a story that a lot of us can relate to. So I just cannot wait to really talk through this with Julia and talk about these inflection points. So Julia, with that, welcome to Choose FI.
Thank you. I'm thrilled to be here.
So Julia, this is a very nuanced statement, so I'm going to try and get it right. But, I think very few people would say that my path to financial independence started with divorce. But I believe that that is an accurate summation of your story. Like, if not for the divorce, if not for this financial chaos that you had to come through, we're probably not having this conversation right now. Is that accurate?
It is. And I wouldn't have thought about it that way before looking back, actually.
So tell us a little bit about how we got to this point. I mean, Brad gave us a little bit of a setup about your savings habit. It sounds like you played decent defense, right? You were a natural saver. You're making decent money choices. You joined the Coast Guard, and just give us a little sense for like your actual money story and then how, what your financial status was coming out of the divorce.
Absolutely. So before I met my former spouse, I was the kind of person who didn't go out to eat. I didn't buy anything I didn't absolutely need. My parents were very strong about needs versus wants. And if it wasn't a need, I didn't buy it. I bought underwear and bars of soap, and that was about it. And my former spouse actually helped me learn that spending can be a good thing. And so that was one of the things that I learned from him that honestly I think was probably something that I've retained to a moderate degree, that is a good thing to do in life, is to be able to spend money on things that you want from time to time. But what I didn't realize early on was that he was a significantly irresponsible spender. And he was able to hide a lot of that from me very early on. And because I was in love, like I think I mentioned to you, Brad, I had done all the things I was supposed to do. I got good grades. I went to a great school. I met a guy that really loved me and I loved him and we were going to get married. And so the rest of it was just noise. It didn't matter if he was bad with money and if I was good with money. We would work that out because we loved each other. So we got married. We started our lives together. That included a house that was probably more than we should have purchased at the time. That included used vehicles, but still vehicles that were financed. And then at some point, I ended up getting a new vehicle. And it also included his continued spending. And by the time we got towards the end of our marriage, there were months that I couldn't pay all of our bills. I couldn't pay the credit card. And I would try everything on regards to, okay, well, why don't we go to just cash? And you can just use the debit card. And when the money's gone, it's gone. Or how about you have a specific card that's just for gas and food? So when you go get groceries, then you just use that card. And so we tried various different tactics, but inevitably we'd be good for 2 weeks and then we'd have 2 weeks of overspending. So when I got to the divorce, I had the house. And at that point, I think we had $300,000 still on the mortgage. And I had the car, which had still $20,000 left. And I used the last of my savings to fund the divorce. I was in a place where financially I felt okay because I had a stable income. Thank goodness I had an excellent job with the Coast Guard. Thank goodness I had a support structure within my unit. They recognized that something was wrong and they were willing to support me. But I was definitely at rock bottom when it came financially. And that made me very insecure because I have always been the kind of person who saved. I have always been the kind of person who didn't like spending. And I had turned into someone I didn't even recognize. And so the divorce was the thing that started to bring me out of the fog. It helped me clarify where I was going, and try to figure out how I got to where I was. And I actually ended up taking a Dave Ramsey class. And the Dave Ramsey class, obviously, you guys have talked about him before, and he's very clear. At first he's like, get $1,000 in the bank. And I said, oh, okay, I've already done that. That's good. I'm good.
Step one, done.
Right. And then it was now get rid of debt. And you're like, oh, well, what do I have left? Oh, okay. It was actually a Volkswagen diesel. And it was during that period when they were recalling them all. So I actually was quite lucky because they ended up buying it back. And then I had already financed a new used vehicle, which I still have now, but I paid it off within a year. So I got that cleared up. And then it was the next few steps of, saving for college and for the kids and starting to put money back into my TSP and my Roth IRA, all that sort of stuff. So it helped realign all of these financial objectives that had gotten lost along the way when I couldn't even pay the credit card at the end of the month. So that's really how it started and how the divorce led to this financial path that I'm on now.
So, Julia, that was absolutely incredible. I mean, it's so interesting. Some of the things you said in there, right? You were someone that you didn't even recognize. And this divorce, while obviously nobody would wish that, it did clarify this for you. And I'm curious if you could kind of put yourself back in that space where you didn't recognize your spending habits. Like, was it mostly the relationship, or was it truly something had changed in you to the point where you went from this natural saver, maybe almost as you were describing it, to the point of maybe deprivation, to someone who spent freely? Like, did you personally change?
That's an interesting question. I think looking back, I've always focused on his spending, but I definitely think that mine had changed as well. I had become unconscious in my spending, in going out to the grocery store and just buying whatever I felt like buying because I knew that, the family would like it. Being okay with, oh, we're going to go buy a gym set just because, and maybe we'll use it, maybe we won't. And I definitely still felt that underlying anxiety every time we spent money, but it had been dulled over the years because when you develop those new habits, sometimes you don't recognize the internal red flags that are popping up.
And speaking of those kind of red flags generally, you said the rest was noise because we loved each other, right? And I think a lot of people get into that situation. And I'm curious, like, what advice would you give yourself now, or the other people who are listening to this, who are undoubtedly in a similar situation where they know something is wrong, but they're putting it to the side because we do love each other. Everything can get better. All these things we tell ourselves. Like, what would you go back and tell yourself?
I think exactly that I need to pay attention to my instincts and to the red flags. I had them for years. We dated for almost 4 years, and there were signs along the way. And I saw them, I recognized them. But because I thought that this is what I was supposed to do, I assumed everything would be okay, not really realizing that that's not how life works. I was still obviously a little bit naive at that point. And today I give myself that same advice. If I am doing something with a group of people, or I want to start a new relationship, or whatever the case may be, if there is a red flag, I pay attention to it. I slow down, I back up, and I contemplate it. I figure out why there's a red flag, what it is about that that's causing me to have doubts. And sometimes that's it, that ends it. Sometimes it's work throughable. Sometimes it depends on the conversations we can have, but it's definitely something that needs to be addressed before I can move on.
Yeah, I mean, that probably most succinctly is trust your gut, right? You see
Yes.
those red flags, it's trust yourself, right? And ask those questions. And like you said, okay, maybe there's an answer and we move on and it is what it is, but to at least look into it further. So, I mean, I love that. And just one thing that I wanted to comment on is how you said, I did everything I was supposed to do, and I just kind of assumed that everything was going to be okay, right? And how many of us do that, right? Like, oh, I'm going to go to college because that's what society tells me to do. Come hell or high water, I don't care what I have to pay. Like, that's what society tells. So how could I go wrong? Or buying a house, how could I go wrong? That's the American dream. And that's not to say that that's not right for many or most people, right? But to actually take that step back and question, right? I think that's maybe what we're trying to get through here at Choosify the most is those kind of critical thinking skills of don't just assume because society tells you that getting the mortgage or getting that college degree or getting married, right? That it's just going to work out because that's what everybody does. It's, does this work for me? I think that's the question that people should be asking themselves.
Yes, exactly. This is the path to happiness that has been laid out for us as a society, but maybe that's not my path to happiness. And I didn't understand that until many, many years later.
So this is really an interesting inflection point. You just mentioned like you're gazelle intense right now. Dave's got you on the path. You're like, there's a steady state going on here. Like you're on a plan, you're making great moves. But here we are on this show, and you're having a conversation with us about your own path to financial independence. Like Dave, he isn't really talking about this. So what was that awakening for you? Why are we, what brought this into your worldview?
Okay. Well, just real quick on Dave. So Dave was gazelle intense, and I was powering through. When I've got my mindset on something, I am going to do it. And we'd mentioned this briefly, but I definitely went all in. I cut up my credit cards, closed the accounts. I had paper envelopes with cash that I took to the grocery store, and I paid for everything with cash, and I paid the kids in cash, and I paid the sitter in cash, and everything that I possibly could. So I was all in. And honestly, that's where I got the discipline from to manage the budget. I did the budget with pencil and paper every single month and made sure that the envelopes lined up. And a lot of people talk about how cumbersome that was for me because I was all in. It really helped solidify a lot of habits because I did it for over a year, I want to say, and I preached it. But what got me started in this direction was actually Dave Ramsey, because I ended up coming to a new unit, seeing that we were having members that needed some additional financial training. And I said, you know what? Dave Ramsey got me started. Why can't he help others? There's no reason I can't teach this. So I decided to promote teaching a class at my unit. I got the support, we got the books, we got the class rolling. And it was well timed because it was right after the government shutdown when Coast Guard members actually did not get paid for a month. And while my section was fine, I know that there were people that were impacted by that negatively. They were concerned about not being able to pay their rent because they hadn't saved anything because it's a government job. There's 100% security. I will always get paid until the government shuts down and you don't. So that class ended up getting me in touch with another Coast Guard member that had been at my unit. And she said, hey, have you ever heard of this show called Choosify? And I went, no, and I don't really listen to podcasts. So, I moved on. Right. And she said, no, you really need to listen to this. If you're at all into personal finance, you're going to love this show. And that was May of 2019. So a little bit over a year ago. And it took me probably a month to even figure out how to find and download the podcast. Not going to lie. I don't remember which one I listened to first, but once I did, I think it was the Roth conversion ladder that really got into my brain and went, wait a minute. I've never heard of that. That's a possibility. Roth is king. I could have swore Roth was king, but maybe there's something to traditional and being able to optimize your taxes and being able to do things with your finances that I had never even considered. And what is this thing called a fee on my investment accounts? And how much am I paying? And so that's what started me down. I started looking at it and I said, I'm paying a higher fee than I really would like to. Maybe I should switch to Vanguard. I can do that. That's easy. It's just a matter of doing some paperwork. And so I did. Last summer, I switched over to Vanguard for my IRA. I looked at my TSP and made some adjustments, but the TSP's fees are actually extremely low. Right. So that was good. But it set me on a path to looking at optimizing things that I'd never optimized before. I had optimized my budget to the penny. I had not done that in anything else. So it was really exciting to be able to see a better way to handle my finances. But I have to say, the one thing that I really struggled with was the travel credit cards. I had cut up my credit cards. I had been without credit for at least 6 months at this point, using cash for 2 years. And I had preached it now in a class to other people that credit cards and any kind of debt was bad. And I slowly came around. It took my friend. It took several episodes with you guys, and you guys have become 2 of my 5 people. So it took some time, but I finally got to the point where I understood, wait a minute, I have the discipline. I have a budget that I keep every month. The amount that I'm spending on groceries isn't going to change whether it's on a credit card or on my debit card. I did switch from the cash envelopes to debit, but the discipline was there. And so the risk of running over on a credit card was negligent for me. And so I have come around and I've started using the travel credit cards and optimizing my travel as well, which is great because the kids go visit their dad. He lives 2 states away. So now I pay for that with points and he still pays me with actual dollars, half of the fare for the kids to fly to see him. So I think for me, that's a win.
Massive win.
Yeah.
That's so cool. And it's amazing how so much of this is just anchoring yourself to a new possibility, right? And you wrote this in your email to me and you said the standard 15% always felt reasonable. And if it was good enough for Dave, why wouldn't he tell people there was no upper limit, right? And you said I felt hoodwinked to some degree. And it wasn't just the idea that you could maybe save 20%, but we on Choosify, we had guests who were saving 70 to 90%, right? So it's anchoring yourself to a new reality and you were doing great. Right? Like maybe you were at that 15 or 20% even. Like anybody would say that's great. But again, you're anchoring yourself to a new possibility, even with this credit card. In the community, you knew you had the discipline and people are opening up very specific credit cards for these rewards. And you realize, oh, wow, maybe this is something I could take advantage of, right? And you dip your toe in and you see that it works with a Chase Sapphire Preferred, I think you said you started with, like we recommend, and it worked. So it's anchoring to that new reality. But I did want to go back to that 15%. Talk us through what your thoughts were as you were, because again, you said you were a natural saver. You learned some personal finance. Like, did you feel like you were winning when you were saving 10 or 15%? And then like, what did it feel like when you said like, oh, wow, there are people who are doing these crazy things out there?
Right. I felt like a rock star. I was like, 15%, I've got this down. And I actually met with a couple of financial advisors and they all said, hey, you've got this down. You're definitely on a track to retire before most people do. And I said, oh, well, that's good. And how early would you like to retire? And I was like, well, how early can I retire? And they're like, well, you won't be able to use your retirement accounts until 59 and a half. And I said, oh, okay, well, 59 and a half it is then. Because I assumed that was the earliest I could possibly retire. And I don't know which one of your guests it was, but early on you had somebody saving 70%. And I was blown away.
You're
and I
allowed to do that?
Right, exactly. It was that permission that nobody had ever said, you have permission to save more than 15%. And I think something else with that goes too, is that a lot of times when they talk about investing, they say, just start with 5%, get the match. And then if you're really doing well, go ahead and bump it up to 10. And you're like, okay, I've done that. What they don't tell you is, hey, guess what? You can actually save up to $19,500 in 2020 into your 401k or your TSP. Nobody says that you can go beyond 10%. And it's like, You guys have talked about opening the aperture on your zone of awareness. My zone of awareness was 5 to 10%. And so I was blowing it out of the water with 15. And that was so eye-opening just to be able to see that there were other people who had thought about it differently and who were really going above and beyond when it came to saving. And suddenly my overachiever self felt like I hadn't even scratched the surface.
I have found my tribe.
Yes, exactly.
Oh, that's so cool. And I mean, meeting with these financial advisors, again, you were doing the right thing. And not for nothing, but you're an active duty Coast Guard officer, right? You get a pension, potentially if you leave even at this point, but 7 years from now, right?
Yes,
6.5
that's the
years.
plan.
Now, yeah, you might stay in past that, which is great. But theoretically, again, it's changing that zone of awareness to, wow, to reach financial independence or to retire, I just need to have enough money to cover my expenses, right? It's not some arbitrary, I need to do it at 59 and a half or at X date. It's just, wow, you mean I have a pension coming in and I just have to cover my expenses. So that changes the whole thing from, wow, it's outside of my control, or I have to succumb to these rules of 59 and a half to, wow, I control the entirety of this. If I love the Coast Guard, which by all means it seems you do, like you stay in as long as you want, right? And beyond that 20 years if you want to, but you control it. And that is a total rethink on life.
It absolutely is. And I think that is what has given me new purpose, because I suddenly realize I'm not required to work for somebody else again. Once I'm done with the Coast Guard, and right now I do plan on getting out at 20 and spending a few years with the kids and really diving into their activities and what they're up to. And I know that they're going to be older teenagers. And I know that people say they have, trouble connecting with teenagers, but that's my plan, is really to give them all of my time and my heart and the things that I'm not able to devote to them now. But beyond that, people still ask, my dad can't believe that I wouldn't work again. Aren't you going to get bored? I hear that all the time. And I'm like, anytime I have a week off, I have 10 things on my list that I want to get accomplished. And those are things that require long-term commitment, but they're also things that are short-term projects. And I have a list of 10 passion projects going at all times that I can't wait to really pursue. And so I don't think I'm going to get bored. And the idea of being able to dive into those without having to worry about where my rent is coming from, or where my vacation fund is coming from, or where the food on the table is coming from is so freeing that I'm excited about the future. I'm excited about where I'm going. And I know that I'm going to have the chance to really accomplish all the things in my life that I want to.
I mean, what you're describing is, I can't wait till I have more time to dedicate to my talent stack. Right?
Yes.
Like that's the verbiage there. It's the same way, that I had a completely different direction I was planning on going, but you have just put the flag down right here. Let's spend some time here. I can't imagine a world in which I were to finish, my corporate job, I were to stop Choose FI, I were to stop any project, and I would be bored. I have so many ideas and interest. And I think it actually goes to, I love your phrase, much better than anything Brad and I've ever said, opening the aperture of your zone of awareness. That will always be said in that way from here on out. But like, as soon as you realize that you have one life, and yes, for a season of life, most of us, nearly all of us, will have to put the vast majority of our focus, our interest, our skill into an employer or a corporation's goals. That's just, you're going to need to do that. That's how we're going to earn a wage. It's how we're going to work towards financial independence. That's the path. But for you to say, all right, once that is no longer my focus, I'm going to have nothing. Like, I'm just going to be bored. That's crazy. I don't understand that. I am like building a list of, as soon as I have more time, more space, this is the next series of things that I want to work on. Some of them will not earn a dime, and that's fine. Some of them will earn a lot of money. And I've already been able to prove that out in different capacities. And it doesn't really matter. You can prioritize them in different ways based on your interests. And if you're doing it through the lens of having reached financial independence, the monetary aspect is the least important. But someone's worried about you. Oh, are you going to be bored? How are you going to support yourself? Don't worry. We'll be okay.
Exactly.
Hey, this is Andrew from the Choose FI team. Hope you're enjoying the interview. We're going to get right back to it right after these quick messages.
So actually, speaking of your talent stack, and we're going to come back to your story here in just a second, but I'd love to just spend a little bit of time talking about audiobook narration, as I know that's something that you've put a little bit of time into over the last couple of years. And tell us, what was the inception of that and kind of where are you on this particular part of your talent stack?
Absolutely. So, audiobook narration I took up last fall because it was something that I had percolating in the back of my head for a while. I was like, oh, I think I would enjoy that. I really like speaking. I like public speaking. People have said I have a good voice. I remember actually while I was at the Coast Guard Academy, we would have to do the morning announcements, so to speak, kind of like at a regular school. And you'd have to list off specific things through the day. And I remember anytime I did that, I would get people coming up to me afterwards. Hey, I really liked the way you did the morning announcements. You should do it every day. I wish you could do it every. I was like, the morning announcements of all the silly things. But it wasn't just that. It was when I would do a presentation at church or at school or for work, people always said, hey, you should do this. You've got a great voice and skill for it. And, it just sort of sits there. You don't do anything with it. And I had a friend, well, actually, Danny on the show said she was going to start it. And I said, oh, well, maybe I can start. It's just a side thing. It doesn't have to take a lot of time. It's something I do in the evenings. Why not? And I had a friend who does audio engineering. And I said, you know what? This was the roadblock. I didn't know how to get started. But he gave me that doorway because I knew that he did audio editing and finishing for a band. I said, well, maybe he can teach me. So I just asked, I said, can you tell me what I would need to do? Can you help me record my first sample script? And he said, sure, absolutely. So he took me into the studio. He showed me his microphones and his setup. We actually tested 2 or 3 microphones to see which one he would recommend for my voice. And then he sent me the Amazon links for each of the pieces of equipment that he thought I should purchase. And within a week, I had my setup. I had gone to an online website to connect me with authors, and I was putting auditions in. And within a month, I had 2 or 3 offers, and I accepted one, and off I went. So it was definitely a difficult learning experience at the get-go. I don't think I did enough. I jumped in before I was really ready. I didn't do enough research about how to actually edit and what programs to use, but he recommended Audacity. So that's what I started with. And my first book, I had not edited it properly. I had put too much low noise in, and all of the files that I had submitted when I finished the book were rejected. But I had not saved the raw files. And so I had to re-record the entire book again from scratch for that first one I did. It was so painful, but I never did it again. And now I have the raw files, the edited files. So I've definitely come a long way and learned. And my last book was definitely much smoother. The production quality was on point, and the author was thrilled. She said that she rarely had somebody with so few flaws at the first submission. So it was definitely a hard thing to learn, but that's where I'm at now. And I'm taking a break because of the kids. I'm actually in your Talent Stacker class, Jonathan, to start a podcast. So I may be going that direction. At this point, I'm not in any kind of rush. It's one of those I get to dip my toes in and try different things. So that's where I'm at with that.
Yeah, that's so cool. And what you're talking about is that learning curve of learning these skills, right? Like maybe you screwed that first one up, but you're never going to make that mistake again, right? And this is something that's fun. And there was one quote you said in there that really jumped off the page to me. When you're talking about, you've thought about doing this your whole life, and you said it just sort of sits there, right? I mean, think about how it just sort of sits there for most of us for all of our lives, right? Like that is life. It just sort of sits there because we have to go to a job 40, 50, 60 hours a week. You don't get to follow those passions, right? We talked 5 minutes ago about, oh, aren't you going to be bored? How could you possibly be bored when you have the whole world at your fingertips, you have financial security, and you have time? It doesn't have to just sit there anymore, right? Isn't that what FI is all about?
Absolutely. And actually, I keep a list. It's my life list of all the things that I want to accomplish. Things like hiking the Appalachian Trail, things like kite surfing, things like starting a podcast. So that sort of thing. I have the list of all of the things that when I have the opportunity, I'm going to pursue. And maybe it takes me a year to learn how to play the violin. But if that's my goal for the year because I've never done it and I want to, then it's fun to have the freedom to pursue that and not be obligated to the next job or other people's expectations. Going back to should, I have done what I should. It didn't work out. And so now I'm going to do the things that God has given me passion for. and see where that leads. I don't know yet what my purpose is, but I'm guaranteed going to find it.
Life of passion. Yeah, this is so cool. And, it's just, I'm thinking like your path to financial independence, starting a divorce in 2016, that had to have rocked you on your heels, but you made progress. You got back to steady state. You learned that you're not capped at 15%, regardless of what somebody somewhere says. You can do whatever you want, and you can actually see how the math will work out and how it will give you options sooner if you lean into it in a big way. What have you kind of mapped out as like your financial independent state? When will you be at that point?
So I am including my pension in my financial independence state. I actually haven't mapped it out. If I didn't have a pension, I could do that.
No.
No, you have a pension.
You have
There's
a
no
pension.
I
need.
do. So including the pension. So this year I started a taxable brokerage account for those gap years. So I maxed out my TSP, I've maxed out my IRA, but I had never really dabbled in a non-retirement investment account. So you guys got me started in that. And I have been putting every extra dollar into that. And with that account, if I continue funding it the way that I have been, I will be fat fi with my pension by the time I get to 2027 and I retire.
Fat
So,
fi. Just explain that for our audience. If they're like, wait, fat fi,
Sure.
what? I want to do that. What does that mean to you?
So for me, that means instead of having 25 times my living expenses, I will have actually more than 30 times my living expenses. So I could pull out 2.5% every year of that taxable investment account, add that to what I'm getting from my pension, and have more than I need to live the current life I'm living in California, where my rent is astronomical.
Yeah. So you're, I can do what I want fi.
Exactly. I can live in Bay Area, California if I want to, right?
Oh man, to have options like that is so cool. So, okay, let's go back to this pension real quick and how you calculate it in, because I think we've had over the nearly 4 years of this podcast, we've had so many questions about this and how people should consider it in their FI number, because it technically, the way that we define financial independence is generally you take your annual expenses and multiply by 25. And that's the amount you need in your net worth to be roughly at financial independence. Now we can kind of quibble over the exact percentage. Is it 3.5? Is it 3.2? All these things. But the rule of thumb is that it's 25 times your annual expenses. But things get thrown off a little bit, obviously, when you have just straight money coming to you from a pension each month or each year. So can you talk through how you conceptualize that?
Absolutely. So I'm still working through some of the bits about whether I'll be able to successfully do a Roth conversion, because I won't be in the super low tax bracket because I am bringing in money every month because of the pension. So that's still being worked. But as far as conceptualizing my FI number, I looked at how much my anticipated pension will be when I've hit 20 years in the Coast Guard, what my anticipated rank will be. There's military calculators that give you what your pension will be each year moving forward, and it accounts for inflation, so it grows with time as well, which is excellent. I think the military pension is one of the best that exist. And I did read Grumpus Maximus's book, The Golden Albatross, and got a very comfortable sense for the strength of the military pension. But if I wanted to live my current life in California with my annual expenses, so I've been tracking my expenses for several years, obviously with the budget, and there's going to be a difference between what the pension will cover and what my current expenses are. And so I took that difference and then multiplied that by 25 to figure out what essentially my FI number is based on that gap. And if I can cover those additional expenses with my brokerage account, so not even looking at my retirement accounts, then I will feel comfortable living on my pension and that additional taxable income, investment.
And maybe that's even a little bit conservative, because I usually just lump the retirement accounts, because early retirement by definition also encompasses traditional retirement. So I would probably even lump the retirement in with the taxable. But for the purposes of this conversation, it's certainly reasonable to do what you did. I'd like to actually ask you a question a little bit about how you iterated either out of the baby steps or how you adapted them to this different goal. I mean, you talked about the baby steps were really important to you early on. That gave you this sense of, all right, things are going to be okay. But you're not strictly following them. Like, you're using credit cards responsibly, but you're using them. There's no room in the baby steps for that. And then 2, your savings percentage is way, way higher, which probably affects some of the other things that were on, the baby steps later on, like pay off the home early or something along those lines. Like, just give us a sense for how you mapped out what your current path is to what the babies, because I think there are a lot of people that kind of follow this path. They start on baby steps, they get to baby step 3, and then they kind of hit a fork in the road. And, some of them are purists and some of them say, you know what, maybe 5 is more my pace. I'm just curious what approach you took on this.
Well, I think I still follow the tenets of Dave Ramsey. Don't go into debt. Obviously, with the credit cards, that's a little bit different. And that definitely took a different mindset shift for me, where I had to understand that I'm still following the tenets with regards to spending within my means. I'm still designating my giving and my saving, and then putting money into my 4 walls, which, are your housing and your food and your transportation. And I don't remember what the 4th one is, but so I've got those things set up with the budget. And the next steps for Dave Ramsey are much more generic. They're not as specific. He says, put 15% into your retirement accounts. I had done that. And then go ahead, pay off your house, and then go ahead and put money into your kids' college. So I funded the kids' college to the point where I was comfortable at letting them grow. So that's done. I did sell the house in 2017, so I don't have a mortgage anymore. So that's something that I'll have to contemplate in the future. If I want to buy a house, when am I going to settle? I don't even know where I'm going to be in 10 years. So that's a different question altogether. But it was really moving beyond that. I have met the minimum standard of Dave Ramsey with the 15%. Yep, check, done. And I've done what he recommends, and now it's build wealth and give. So, technically, we are in the build wealth and give stage because I don't have a mortgage. So I don't think that there is a misalignment between what Choosify and Dave Ramsey are saying in that regard, because I'm moving on into that next stage, and how I define that is more in line with what Choosify has as its pillars.
Interesting. So I was in Facebook recently, and someone was talking about Choosify in like a Chris Hogan Facebook group or something. And one of the moderators said the principles of Choosify are not compatible with somebody on the path, in the Dave Ramsey community. And I said, like, do you agree with that? Has someone gone rogue when they Choosify, or are these two visions aligned?
I think they're aligned. I think you guys mentioned it very early on. This is the graduate level class. We've moved beyond Finances 101. This is how do we do this at a more sophisticated, advanced level for those that want to. There are some people that are perfectly content to put 15% into their retirement and live a life that they enjoy working for 40 years on the standard path. And that's fine. And they will get there in a comfortable way. They will have financial freedom at some point following Dave's path. But I think if you want to do it a little bit differently off the beaten path, you go further. And Choosify, FI, takes it further. It takes it to the next level.
See, Dave, we can still be friends. We can all coexist. Everybody can do this together.
Yeah. And we greatly admire Dave Ramsey, right? We've said so many times, like, he has helped millions and millions of people, including you, right? Like, you started your path with Dave Ramsey. And like Julia said, and that's fine, right? Like, if you want to stay with Dave Ramsey, that is wonderful. Like, he has helped so many millions of people. If you're looking for that next thing beyond those couple baby steps, we think that financial independence gets you there. So we think these are very, very aligned without question. And Julia, I wanted to just quickly go back. You said something about kind of having to reframe with the credit cards. And I totally get that, because that clearly, credit cards are not something you do when you're following Dave Ramsey. But, you said in there, like, I've got to get used to debt. And, I just wanted to clarify or give you the chance to clarify. Like, obviously, we advise people paying off those credit cards on time and in full every single month. So, like, I personally, when I think of my credit card, I don't think of it as debt. I just think of it as, instead of paying for it with a debit card, I paid for it with my credit card, and then I just pay it off at the end of the month. So there's no interest that's incurred. I don't think of that as debt. I just think of it as, I'm just waiting to pay it off for 3 weeks.
And even there, Brad, you stated it as 2 separate steps. Like, I pay it off. I don't even do that. I just turn on auto pay the statement in full. It's not even a second step. It's just like, it's coming out of my bank account at the end of the month. And that's probably, I'm sure that's the exact same thing.
Yeah, that's exactly what I do. And certainly I advise everybody, like we've talked about here, I keep a couple extra $1,000 in my checking account just because I don't want to have to worry about it. And then I have this auto pay set up. You can do that on any credit card I've ever seen. You link your bank account, you set up pay full statement balance, and the whole thing is paid off. You never have to worry about it.
There's two things that I wanted to mention. I think it'll be good for you to hear this, potentially, depending on your own personal FI plans. I don't think you're going to need this based on your strategy, but since you brought it up earlier, it'll be useful for you and also other listeners. You mentioned that one of the big ideas that really resonated with you, that showed you that you didn't know everything already and that there was more to learn, was the Roth conversion ladder. It's very important for military members and people that are relying on pensions to hear this statement. The Roth conversion ladder is not going to be a good option for you. By virtue of this awesome thing you have, your pension, you're always going to have income. That's the point of your pension. The Roth conversion ladder requires having a few years with no income to get this thing going. That's the entire point. Now, that's a longer episode. So the bad news is the Roth conversion ladder isn't going to work. The good news is it's not going to work because you don't need it. You have the world's best pension. It's going to be just fine. You too can be fat FI. I do what I want FI. No problem. Now, the other thing I wanted to just kind of come back to, because I think it's really indicative of where you're headed, is embracing the idea of the talent stack. And I just wanted to give you personally maybe just something that I've observed and also point something out to our audience. So sometimes we're so in the weeds that we have trouble identifying what we're actually good at and what we actually genuinely enjoy doing. But when you look at it now with the benefit of hindsight, and maybe with a few people telling you, start to see the patterns. The exact same thing that you said. People would always come to me and notice that, hey, not only do I enjoy public speaking, but I'm actually kind of good at it. And people say, you should jump at this opportunity. You should do this. You should do some audiobook narration. I wonder, in your life, Julia, it's pretty obvious, but to our audience listening to this, maybe there's something that people are telling them over and over again. They're really good at it and they actually enjoy it, but they've never really given themselves permission to explore it further because they're so involved in how busy their life is. How cool would it be for us to just build a little bandwidth, a little space so we could actually take some time and reflect, all right, I'm good at this. What does that mean? What could I build around this? Just give us time to explore that question. And so we think about that, I think about that personally now as building, my talent stack. And you've done that as well. And you can see as of right now, your talent stack includes public speaking and it includes communication. I will actually go so far as to say it's not just oral communication, but it's written. Your copy, the emails you sent us were amazing. Brad talked about that offline. Your ability to write and to communicate your ideas is far better than mine, just unbelievable. And Brad and I were both blown away. So you have that going for you. Like, what does that mean as we go into the next phase? And so you're talking about audiobook narration. Let's use this as an example. I enjoy this. I'm interested in this. So right now, what do we do right now? We realize that there's no downside. I can do this with no risk. It was a $200, $300 investment. I'm doing it in my free time. And I learned that I have potential, but I'm really bad at it, or I was really bad at it. Like actually giving a deliverable, I blew it. I had to do it all over again, but now I learned something that didn't work. So now you would never know what didn't work if you hadn't screwed it up, but you did it in a no risk way where now who you are now is the product of that failure. Failure isn't something to be feared. It's to be embraced because we take that into the next version of what it is that we're going to be working on. We'll never have to go back and refigure that out. We got that part figured out. So how do we build on that? So now you have this resume of 3 or 4 audiobooks that you've done. You've gone from having to redo it entirely to now not having to worry about that, to now actually bringing in some residual income, and now you're thinking, well, how do I scale? So here's where we are right now. We're telling your story on a podcast with a large audience. People hear your audio quality is amazing. Your voice is amazing. Many people in this audience are aspiring authors, and they're saying, wow, I wish maybe she could do an audition for me, or maybe she could, read my book. If someone wanted to do that right now, you might realize as a result of this conversation, like if someone wanted to say yes to you, what would they actually do? Oh, well, send me an email at juliaharder@gmail.com. Well, that's fine. That's a place to start. And if you want to drop that at the end of the episode, but I would say the next piece of your talent stack is we need to build an outward facing brand for our services, right? So it would be maybe juliaharder.com, or it would be a website, and that website would have a simple contact form describing what your services are, having a demo of some of the content you've produced, and a way to contact you. And then you'd want to start thinking through, well, what are some of your rates? And you start building that out. Now, there's a bunch there that I put on you. And the cool thing is, none of that needs to be solved this week. But over the next week, over the next 2 weeks, over the next year, you can start building it one piece at a time, realizing that this is a zero risk game. It's just a process of being willing to ask a question and then go implement that piece in your life. And where would you be a year from now when you've done all of these tiny little micro steps, but they're just done? You're building on the next thing. You don't have to go back and read it. It's not like every day you wake up and you say, well, now I need to get a website. No, that was done, right? We might make it a little better. We might improve the branding. We might change the demo reel, but everything you did yesterday is still there and you're building on that. That's what it looks like when you're building your talent stack. And it's really cool. You're like, well, if only I had more time, maybe I could knock out some more of these questions. Exactly. That's why we don't wait at a 15% savings rate until we're 60-year-old to get started on these things. We want to have a decade of each day waking up excited about what the day has to offer us and then tackling those questions, knowing that whatever we do today will be done and we'll be building on that tomorrow. What we're building is a better life. All right, everyone, back by popular demand. I just wanted you to know that this is a crowdsourced show, which means that when you have criticism for us and you let us know strongly and vocally, when you write us open source letters, we read them, we listen, and sometimes we backpedal. And for the last 3 months or so, we have not done the hot seat. And we had the very best of intentions. And we just wanted to focus on the content. To be honest with you, we weren't sure if you guys were still digging it, if you were still loving it. And sometimes it takes taking something away to find out what you're missing, right? That's the entire case we all make. And enough of you have messaged us both on the Facebook group and by email to say it needs to come back. We need the hot seat intro. We need the answers. It needs to exist. That we have decided to backpedal on that. And we are going to be doing our first hot seat in probably 4 or 5 months. We're doing it today. So with that, Julia, are you ready for the hot seat?
Oh, I am so excited. Yes.
In a world drowning in debt and rampant consumption, trapped by the chains of lifestyle inflation, these questions highlight the secrets of those who have broken free. Welcome to the Choose FI Hot Seat.
All right, Julia, question number 1. What is your favorite blog, podcast, or book of all time?
So beyond Choose FI, because this rules my world right now, NPR's Planet Money is really fantastic, Hidden Brain. And then I've got 2 books, Never Split the Difference, which is a great negotiation book that I would recommend to anybody who wants to go into any kind of negotiation. And Untethered Soul was one that has impacted my life over and over again. Every time I read it, I get something new.
Question number 2, an inflection point in your life that was especially memorable or meaningful.
So I have a few. We've obviously talked about the divorce, but I want to say when I had my first child, I did it completely without any sort of pain medication. And I had no idea by the end why I had made that decision. It was so awful. And it was when I gave up on doing it naturally that I was ready to deliver. It was at that point when I finally said, no more, can I take it, that my body was ready to go. And I've learned a lot about that's a lot of times how life works, is when you let go, that's when you're finally ready to move forward.
Wow, that is really profound. It's just that moment of acceptance, right?
Yes.
That's incredible.
I feel like you just speak and write in polished, perfect, inspirational prose. Just speak more often.
I'll do some more audiobooks.
There it
Nice.
is. Write your own. You could be on both ends of this, right?
Yeah, really. All right, Julia, question number 3. What is your favorite life hack?
I am a big do-it-yourselfer. So I will do everything from I bake my own bread, I fix holes in the ceiling, I build things, and anything I can do myself in a new and better way, I do. I also keep lists, like I said, my life list, and that helps me anytime I want to go camping. I pull up my camping list, and then I can just check it off, or my grocery list is on my phone, so I check things off or uncheck them as needed. It really helps save time and makes things a lot easier.
It just clicked with me what you did there. You don't have a bucket list. You have a life list. I'm on board with that.
Yeah.
I'm all caught up. I like that. Yeah. Okay. Question number 4, your biggest financial mistake.
Not maxing out my TSP for so many years. I don't even know what the opportunity cost was there, but I could have done it. And because I was in a different place and no one had ever told me it was even possible, I didn't do it. And I think I wouldn't have to invest anymore at this point if I had done it earlier.
That's for military members, but you know how many entrepreneurs are totally eligible for the solo 401k and they're making great money, but there's one form you need to print off Fidelity's website and fill out and send it in, and they don't. That's literally the only thing keeping them from pre-tax $19,500 a year at, just an incredible savings for their future selves. So it's not just military members that need to look into this and do better. Everyone. Probably in our audience, 30% of our audience, this is the one action step they need to do this week. Go find out what the limits are and how they can start contributing more to their pre-tax accounts.
Yeah, and Julia, to your point, it's about compounding, right? And letting the power of compounding take over. Having saved at an earlier age, it's always more beneficial. Obviously, you can't go back on mistakes. We've all made mistakes. We wish we had found this when we were 18, right? So it's not to beat yourself up, obviously, but just to everybody out there listening, the power of compounding is just essential. And as early as you can do this, the better, truly. All right. Question number 5, the advice you would give your younger self.
We did talk about this in the episode. It would be to pay attention to the red flags. Take a step back and make sure that you understand what they mean. Trust your gut. It's so hard to do. I think for some people it's easy. For me, it's so hard to do. And I want to have the confidence at a younger age to be able to trust myself.
All right. Now, we do have a bonus question for you. What purchase have you made over the past 12 months that has added the most value to your life?
This is a little outside of that 12 months, but it has had so much value. I actually bought a piano, and you can get them on Craigslist for basically nothing, just because people want them out of their house. But I had to have it tuned, and that was more than nothing. But I bought it for my son because of his lessons. But now, not just my son, but my daughter and myself, all 3 take piano lessons, and it has enriched our lives beyond anything I would have predicted. So definitely the best purchase that I've made in the last year or so.
I love the parallels there. It's that intersection between I want to do everything, but you can only do so much at a time. So, it's like professional dilettante, but piano is one of those things that, again, I'm not going to have time to be bored. Don't worry about me. We'll be fine.
Exactly.
All right. So, Julia, if someone wants you to read their audiobook, what is the best way for them to contact you?
Well, I don't have a website. That would be fantastic right now.
Not the made-up Gmail address or...
No. Facebook is probably the best way to reach me. I'm in the Choose FI group, but Julia Harder on Facebook is... Yeah, that's the way to get a hold of me these days.
All right, no, that's good. That's good. But here we go. As a community, can we hold her accountable? So this episode isn't going live tomorrow. We just recorded it. So maybe there are 3 weeks, a month. Brad, maybe we could even push this out where this episode is going to go out 1 month from now. Could we say, Julie, this episode's going out. By this episode release date, you need to have this website ready to go and just have a contact form. Now, I don't care if nobody messages you, because nobody heard this, thought to themselves, I need Julia's services. It still wouldn't be a failure. But what if someone did? And right now, all you said is, well, you got to go onto this Facebook platform and search for Julia Harder, and maybe we'll be able to get, I'm sure we can make it work. How about this, Julia? You commit to, by the time this episode goes live, you have a landing page set up that someone can send you a message and ask to just do a consult or to share with you their vision for a book. And if you do that, on the Friday roundup that goes out with this episode, Brad and I will share that domain for the audience and make sure they have a way to reach you. How about that?
Sure, I can do that.
All right.
Jonathan, you're in full mastermind mode here. I like this.
I know, but this is what accountability looks like. And it's not just accountability between me and you, Brad, or me, you, and Julia. This is what a community does, a community of people that are focused on just getting a little bit better and saying, you know what if we could? It's not a matter of if we can. It's like, what if we could? And what does that look like? And I think we can all do a little bit better. Julia, you inspire us.
Oh, thank you. You have no idea how much you've changed my life.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. This has been fantastic.
Thank you for having me. It's a thrill of a lifetime.
All right, guys. If you're listening to this episode for the first time and you're open to the idea that you can build a better life for yourself, that we only get one life, let's not waste it, then I would just encourage you to go to choosefi.com/start. On this page, we've put together all the resources that we have to help serve you where you are. Get started on your path to financial independence today. All right, my friends, the fire is spreading. We'll see you next time as we continue to go down the road less traveled.
You've been listening to Choose FI Radio Podcast, where we help middle-class America build wealth, one life hack at a time.